Housing Opportunities Matters, who is the host of this presentation tonight, for inviting our coalition, New Hampshire Housing, as well as Mary Jackson, in which she'll be introducing HomeShare tonight. Very exciting that we're able to talk with you about a couple just creative housing solutions that are very available in our community, or will soon be in our community. One is looking at accessory dwelling units that you might know as mother-in-law apartments, which came into, I guess they became legal all across New Hampshire in July of 2017, which is kind of exciting, and getting towns up to date on, being regulatory, I guess, with the new ordinance. And I have roped George Regan from New Hampshire Housing. He is the Housing Awareness Administrator into this presentation tonight, because he does a great job. He does these presentations all the time, and he has a great perspective, not only about what Jackson needs in terms he's up here all the time, very involved in that Washington Valley, but a perspective on across the state and other housing opportunities there. So I'm very excited. Thank you, George, for coming, and I'm going to let you take it.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Sure says she ropes me into coming up, but really? I mean, is it hard to convince someone to come up, especially this time of year? And I went past this, so I went to Christmas Farm Inn. I remember, because we make memories. I was there probably 20 years ago. And that was a fantastic, magical experience. So hoping magic to happen again tonight. Even though we're talking about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. But for folks in the audience, you may be thinking about that as some option for you, your family, and that's why Victoria asked me to come here, is to not maybe give a lot of histrionics on ADUs, but maybe just talk about it and some of the things maybe consider if you're a homeowner and maybe curious about that. So I'm going to talk to you about that and just talk a little bit about what they are. And I've been up a few times, my colleague Ben Frost, there's been a lot of series talking about accessory dwelling units in Mount Washington Valley, which I think is good, because when that law was coming through and being talked about, there was a lot of perspectives that came out about an aging population, about property owner rights and things like that. So I won't go into a lot of that, but just to get us on the same playing field, an accessory dwelling unit is a second smaller dwelling. And it's basically, I think Victoria had said, an in-law apartment, so it could be something over the garage, part of your house, in your basement, in your attic. But this distinction is that it's got separate eating, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. So there are some other maybe in-law apartments that maybe don't have some of that, and those aren't technically accessory dwelling units. So that's just something. And again, accessory is a word with meaning, and it's the point that it's not code for a duplex, because it's not. A duplex would be kind of similar units, but an accessory dwelling unit is something that's smaller. And again, it could be attached or detached. The law that was passed in New Hampshire back in 2017 came about because homeowners were trying to do accessory dwelling units, and a lot of communities, the regulations didn't allow that, or had some other requirements. Maybe it just has to be a family that's related, have to have a door that's unlocked, so there's some privacy and safety and security issues. And so a lot of that was talked about, but it really came about as the Hampshire home builders were sort of saying, we've got people who are trying to do this and they can't get it done. There's a whole host of reasons that people are trying to do that. And I'll talk about that just in a minute. So again, it's an accessory use. It's got those 4 requirements, and that's kind of what is our defining what an ADU is. And so here's just some pictures of them. You may have seen this before. On both of those pictures are attached, and they're just an extension of a house. It doesn't look like it was a conversion of something, but maybe they just added on. So some people have the ability, in terms of what they've got for acreage, to add something on there, and that's an example of one of them. So both of those are attached. And then these next 2 are essentially over a garage. And so on the left, it's a detached. And if you ever want to see more of these pictures, accessorydwellings.org has some great information and pictures about that. Also, if you look up Cole Peterson, K-O-L, he's someone who wrote Backdoor Revolution, and he's got a lot of ideas and concepts about building an accessory dwelling unit. So these both are detached. You can see on the right, some stairs going up to over the garage, and then this one's attached. And there it is over the garage. And so that was just an extension of the house. They turned out to be separate. So those are just a couple of examples of where an ADU might be. What isn't in that is, okay, if I've got an ADU in my basement or in my attic, my house isn't going to look any different, really. I think that's one of the things is that when it comes to accessory dwelling units, a lot of times you don't even know there's one that's really there, that's existing. So that could be something that people like in their community. So just a bit about some of the demographics, who's interested in this, what's happening in our communities, in our state, in our nation. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is just a recent AARP survey that was done. And you may have seen this in the past because they've been doing these surveys for a number of years. And on the left is like, and this was a survey between people age 18 and then up to 65 plus. What I'd really like to do is remain in my community for as long as possible. So you look at as the age group goes up 65 years and plus, about 86% somewhat and strongly agree. I want to live in my community, even if I can't live in my house. And on the other side, I'd like to stay in my residence. Still the same number, 86% as we get older. And so we've all got our own stories. I've got my own parents' stories about that. The people wanted to stay there long enough, and maybe an accessory dwelling unit was some way to help be a solution for them. Because maybe they have another caregiver that needs to come in. It's either related or not related, or maybe it's a stable income stream. But the other thing I noticed in the survey was they actually asked a question about accessory dwelling units. And it was interesting because if you look, the folks that are younger, like in their 20s and 30s, really want an ADU. And there's probably a reason for that I'll show you in a minute. But as you look at that, regardless of age, people are interested in this as a housing solution. So it's being asked, people are thinking about it. And what I hope to try to share with you tonight is some of the challenges and opportunities that go with that so you can think about it. And that homeowner guidebook that I have back there was a publication we put together to help homeowners look at it from their perspective, say, is this something that maybe I want to think about doing? So again, thinking about why those young people are really interested, well, a couple of years ago, Pew Research Center did a study, and the first time on record, if you look on the upper there, young people, 18 to 34-year-olds are living in their parents' home. And so that's a big change. And we probably all aware that college debt is expensive, so it might mean something different. Certainly through the recession, there was job prospect issues, or even if someone had a job, they might have been underemployed. And so where do I live? And as we know across the state, in a lot of places, rent is really expensive, and it's even harder maybe to get into home ownership. So again, an ADU is an interesting solution maybe for yourself or your income, and certainly for other people that you may not even know about. And then just to dig a little bit further, on the upper right there, 18 to 34-year-old men that are living in their parents' home, and that yellow line extends to surpass them living apart. So guys just seem to not have it as well together as the women in the lower one are sort of saying, I'm gonna move out. So that's just something that's happening. We're seeing that now younger folks are trying to go back and live with their parents. Males more than women, because women have it together, men are still trying to grow up, whatever you think. And so that's a reality that's happening out there. And so that really puts pressure on where am I going to live and what are some of my housing solutions. And certainly we've heard anecdotally that parents are like, yep, I've got my college graduate living with me because they just don't have other places to live, so it's a reality. So then getting to what some of the benefits of an accessory dwelling unit might be. So you may be thinking about your own. But I think really when I just was saying that a lot of times you don't see these accessory dwelling units, and I think it's really important to know that this is a way to add rental supply, whether it's for your own, for you, or you're trying to get other income in. It's a way to add rental supply without eating up a lot more land. And again, if you've got a garage and you can then fix the second floor of it, you haven't added any more use of land. You just intensify the use of it, which is great. And that's why it makes good use of existing housing stock. And again, because of the size of that accessory dwelling unit, it may be something that can be rented at a more affordable level. It all depends. Some of those pictures were some pretty sweet accessory dwelling units, so you can really make those high end, and you can make them however you want. I talked about the income stream. So if you're a homeowner looking down the line in retirement and thinking, how am I going to make ends meet? This could be some solution. And if you can have the resources to invest in, maybe it's a way to stabilize your income down the line. I know a lot of people, that's why they might buy a duplex. They may being one side of it, and that rental stream is something that they can see as a reliable source to help them out. And then, helpful to the elderly and older folks, because they maybe can have, caregivers, or if they're empty nesters, it's another way to have someone there that's close by to check on them, whether that's professional health care or just someone else close on the property. And, that might delay because it's a smaller unit, you may move into that. Some people might be in their house and then they decide, I'm gonna be in the smaller unit and rent the bigger one, and that's single floor living, and I know with my parents that was a big deal, be able to have secure, single floor living, so we didn't have to worry about going up and down stairs and the safety risks that go with that. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And so here it gets down to some of the realities and things to consider, so to build or not to build. And I think these are the things. How am I going to pay for this? How do I want to design it? Do I want to think about that myself, or do I want to get a professional designer to come out? What does that mean if I'm going to rent to someone that I don't know, or even with my children? How am I going to be that landlord and that figure that sort of says what I want you to do, what I don't want you to do, and what happens when the tenant maybe doesn't pay? So that's something that is important to think about if you're thinking about an accessory dwelling unit. And then what do my municipal ordinances allow me to do or not to do? Even with the statewide accessory dwelling unit law, there's a lot of options that towns can have. It had an array of sort of what towns must not do or must do, which I'm not going to get into, but there's a lot of leeway after that. How many bedrooms can I have? How big can it be? The law says it can't be any smaller than 750 square feet, but it doesn't mean that it can be limited to that. I think in Jackson it's 1,000 square feet or maybe something more. I put some information on the ordinances at the end. So those are the kind of big factors to think about. And so when you think about cost consideration, again, I mentioned Cole Peterson. We have some of his books. We've got 6 of them, so you have to fight me for them. But unless someone come up with a good competitive strategy to get these 6 books. So he had done some sort of cost estimating. And so it's there. And so it seemed like the basement conversion can be, it's a big swath from 20,000 to 100, but might be something that can be more doable, as opposed to maybe adding on to your house, which is framing. This is interior framing. Maybe you've already got an existing bathroom somewhere where you just add a kitchen. So that seems to be, that, and again, attic and internal space. Those are things that are making use of some existing space that seem to maybe have the least amount of modifications that's required. But again, as you saw some of those pictures, you can spend a serious amount of money to do like a detached accessory dwelling unit. I'm renovating my house. I think, that's up there. So it's easy, as we know, the cost of labor and lumber can really be a factor to think about. And so those are just a couple of things to think about. And so, okay, if I want to do that, do I have my own liquid assets? What are some of my financing options? And this is where I would say it's great to leverage a relationship with your banker, wherever you maybe have your loans, your deposits, your investments. But certainly, you may want to use some of your cash if you have it, or look at some traditional financing. So if you ever thought about a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan, so the difference is the line of credit, you can keep drawing and paying down, pay interest only for 10, 15 years, and then it terms out. Or a loan that you get the lump sum up front, and then you pay it back in 10, 12, 15 years. And so that's based on the equity of your home. You could refinance your house. That's what I'm thinking about doing now. Refinance with cash out. And it's a good interest rate environment right now, so that could be something to think about. If you're building from scratch, you could do a construction loan and add accessory dwelling unit, and then draw on your own retirement savings, or heaven forbid, a credit card or personal loan. I put it there because, I don't know, it's an option, but don't do it. And so the financing options, as you may know, and I like this because I'm a former banker doing penance, trying to talk about affordable housing. But the financing option is really important to think about, that it's not just collateral value, it's going to be what's my income stream. And there's still some question, and again, a good question for your mortgage banker, is that can I count maybe potential revenue? And probably can't unless you've already got a rental stream from somewhere else. But that might change over time. But it's something to think about. You may get this rental income that may not qualify you for the loan that you're going to do, but it certainly is going to be that cash flow to help you think about your repayment. And so let's think about that a little bit. So if I'm going to put 50,000, and I'll use an example of 100, consider what your total development costs were. So what did it cost for my permit? What did it cost for the design? I had to get a septic permit design approved for my land because I'm adding loading onto that. And then the construction costs and the cost of financing. And so what is that number? So let's say that's a $100,000 development cost and you're getting $1,000 a month rent. Now some people may be considering like, I want my family member here, I'm not going to charge them anything. So it's a different financing scheme. But I look at this and say, I mean, you can do the math easily, but I say 8 to 10 years because there may be other costs along the way. And the thing to consider about is who's paying the heat, hot water. You may not want to separately meter that, but you may want to say your rent includes heat, hot water, and electricity, but you're covering that bill. So those are the things to think about, which is why it might kind of take longer to think about repaying it. But I think Cole Peterson makes a good point here, and I think that there was a lot of concern when the accessory dwelling unit law was passed that there's going to be ADUs just popping up everywhere. And the truth be told is this ADU is illegal already in a lot of places. So it's a chance to make them legal and safer. But on top of that, when you look at that financing, it takes a lot of thought and risk and some financing to be able to do that. So things don't happen that fast. And that's why I think it's good if you're thinking about it to give yourself some lead time about what I may want to get into play to do this and then think about the cost of doing it. And again, if you've got debts, so if you refinance your loan, like a primary your first mortgage, you may refinance it with cash out for another 30 years. So you're sort of paying for that, but it doesn't mean it's going to take you 30 years to pay that off, but you can think about what I need to do to recoup that piece of my financing costs. And then just thinking about, okay, if I'm going to rent being a landlord, it's something to think about. Some people are better suited to that than others, but these are some things to think about. Certainly there's landlord and tenant rights. When you are living in your dwelling, there's a little bit more latitude as a homeowner living in a space about dealing with tenants. But there are, and I said the Consumer's Handbook, that's a good resource if you go online and get that. To talk about lease security deposits, what's the requirement for health codes, what's the eviction process, and then just a couple other things. Think about, okay, because when we had in one of the sessions, we had was it David Infinger, what's his name, Paul?
David. Yeah, from Infinger Insurance.
Talking about that, like it may not be a huge increase, but it's something to think about in terms of your insurance. And then certainly the value of your property, it may be taxed at a higher rate. But it could add value from an appraised perspective to your house as well. So those are some things to think about, and a realtor's a good resource to talk about that, as well as your mortgage banker. So those are just some things maybe to think about. And I'm not going to go through all these, but so what does Jackson allow? And as I went through this, you can sort of see, they talk about that you can do an attached or detached accessory dwelling unit here in Jackson. And they talk about what it can't exceed, so 1,000 square feet. The law says you can't restrict it to one bedroom, and so they don't. They say you can't have more than 2 bedrooms. There's some requirements from off-street parking that you have to think about. And then it talks about, okay, you don't need to replace your septic system, but we have to make sure that there's an approved septic design so that if something goes wrong, your property can handle it. And so that's not everything. There's a lot of other, elements of that ordinance, and they refer back to other elements in the ordinance, but I didn't want to turn it into that kind of tutorial. But this seems, it helps provide really good guidance, and that's when I think talk to the folks in your building code person to kind of get, a lot more of the information about what you can and can't do. So I think what I'd want to leave you with is that, yeah, this is not something you think about lightly, but it's something you can plan for. We've all got our own reasons for why we may want to do it, but certainly from the standpoint of the availability and supply of rental units across the state up here as well, there's real demand. We're just finishing, every year we do a rental survey. We've got preliminary numbers out now. The median, the middle rent for 2 bedrooms still continues to climb. It climbed all through the recession. And the vacancy rate is now down to about below 1. And whether it's 1, 2, or 3%, we're all talking about the fact that there's not a whole lot available. And then there's choice. What's available may not be something that other folks want. So in this environment, you might be doing something for you, but it may also help the community, but everyone has their own sort of motivation for wanting to do it. So the homeowner guide provides some really good information for you to consider. There's a lot of good examples of things that have been done well out there. And again, whether it's for you, for your family members, or for income or whatever, this is a good thing that can provide an opportunity, again, without encroaching a lot on the natural environment that we want to preserve in our communities. And so that's it with me. I know people are taking some pictures. I'm happy to make this available through whomever, or give it to Scott or whatever, for folks that may want to take a look at this PowerPoint and just, have it. So.
You can put it on the town website.
Okay, yeah. So, and you have it, right? So you can maybe give it to Betsy? Maybe just PDF it, just so people can't mess with the text and change my message.
Your presentation.
So that's it for me. So hopefully that was helpful. And I think this is interesting because now, Mary Ann's going to talk about, similar issues but a different solution. So I think it's great to have to be thinking about what are my different solutions that are available out there. So we can maybe take questions afterwards, and I'll bring Mary Ann up unless does someone have any questions they have for me right now that I can answer. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
If you want to put it on other town websites.
Yeah.
What are these small little houses that people can get now?
Yeah, the little granny pods or whatever.
If you have a tremendous amount of land,
Yeah.
and you're able to get electricity and septic that is acceptable,
Right.
does that fall under any of this?
Well, Jackson allows a detached accessory dwelling unit, and I don't know, I didn't go deeper into any of the design standards, but that would be an option, I would think, because if it's detached means it could be something over a garage, or maybe you didn't have a garage, it's just something you build that's detached. And so, yeah, you may have to separately meter that. You've got to think about that septic design that can help both, the primary dwelling and the accessory dwelling. But yeah, I think that would be, and I think it's a good opportunity to talk with the folks in the town to see, what the nuances are for that.
Also tiny homes.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Right, well, is your minimum 350 square feet, is that what you said, in that ordinance?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and so there's that tiny home movement. I like to talk about just what's a home, and how small can I build a home on my property? We can call it a tiny home or a nice home that's small. But, those are,
I saw that you had, some of the improvements would be 50 to 150,000,
Right.
200,000. There are a lot of little tiny homes that are sold for between 35 and let's say 80 or 90.
right,
They would still have to meet the square footage, and then you wouldn't.
right. These you couldn't sell because they're part of the same property. You could rent it, right? And I know that they want to make sure you can't like condominiumize that, but yeah, and there are some pocket neighborhoods that have really small homes that are 200, 300,000 because what you put inside it, the woodworking, the flooring, all of that is really where prices can go up or be stabilized. But yeah.
There was a bill, I think, that came before the legislature that would have allowed, say, 4 tiny homes per lot. Did that not go anywhere?
It went to a study committee, right, Victoria? It's at a study committee, and I think there was a lot of confusion on, those are tiny homes on wheels, and so is that a mobile home? What's the semantic difference of that? But more importantly, how do you deal with hookups and electricity if you can just drive off your lot and not pay your property taxes? So there's a lot of questions that got brought up, so it's moved to a study committee. What I like about that is that it gets us talking about more dense development and smaller homes. And I think with the term tiny homes, much like workforce housing, people have a real diversity in understanding what that means. And that's why I say small homes on a smaller lot. So, yes.
It's on a town-by-town basis, whether it's a primary residence or not, or does that come into play?
Say that question again?
Does it have to be a primary residence, or is that on a town-by-town basis?
So the question is, does it have to be a primary residence? So you've got to be a homeowner, so you have a primary residence. If you wanted to do an accessory dwelling unit, it automatically becomes accessory. So that would be the thing. And in a lot of communities, I see it on your ordinance, but require that it be owner occupied. And it doesn't matter which one, but you've got to be owner occupied.
But if your house in Jackson is a second home, so we've got, you know what I mean?
You got a home somewhere else?
Yeah, we live somewhere else, but we do have a home here as well.
So
Just
you
wondering-
could do it, but will you, if they ask you to be owner occupied, can you owner occupy it? And that might be how many days of the year it's going to be considered that, maybe 185, I don't know if you have it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So that would be the thing. If it's a second home, but you're here more often, so it's truly owner occupied, then yeah, and that would be it. But I think it's a great question because there is concern over that. If it's a seasonal home, then it's no longer your primary residence.
And you wouldn't be able to rent out both of them, like the home
Right.
and the ADU. So
Yeah.
one would have to be just for primary.
Yeah. Okay, right. Okay, yes.
The concept of the ADU, is that for just long-term rentals?
That's a great question, and that is something that I know the legislature has been thinking about. You know, folks will talk about short-term rentals and say, you know, that is not, you know, a residential, proposition. It's a commercial proposition, and so there's discussion around that. An ADU in and of itself doesn't really enter into that. It's a secondary, unit. And what a town allows or doesn't. So Cole Peterson talks about this. They ended up taking away the owner-occupied, all of that, all of those things, because the ADUs just weren't being built. So by the time they were done, and I don't want to figure where he is.
Oregon.
Close. Yes. I should have studied up for this. They removed all of those things, and I don't know what they did about short-term rentals, because the challenge was there just wasn't enough things being built. The idea, especially from a New Hampshire housing standpoint, is this going to be permanent housing supply, something that's a long-term rental and not done for short-term. But the municipalities are the ones that are going to really control that, along with guidance from the state. In Portsmouth, it's a commercial venture. If you have an ADU and you're renting it out for like 30 days or whatever, that's a commercial venture. They don't allow that in the residential zoned area.
I was told by someone that 1,000 square feet for Jackson is living space, that you could have additional storage space that would not count.
This is when it's good to talk to your code enforcement officer, because it could be thought of as living space. And I forget what you were saying. I think you might say living space, 1,000 square feet of living, but that would. You do?
I
Yeah.
don't remember, sorry.
I'm sorry. Tell me. You study every section. So I'm sorry. I'm pointing to Betsy because she pretty much knows everything.
It's enclosed space.
Yeah. Okay.
Whatever that means.
Right.
So not the
Yes,
porch or the patio.
and that's why it's good to talk to the code enforcement person and say, what does that really mean? Because does that mean where my heating and cooling is? Because that's not a livable space. And that could be another 30, 40 square feet, depending. So it's a great question, and those are some good things to ask that can give you the answer right in your own community. Yes?
From a practical standpoint of really trying to maximize additional housing, one of the major objections for people not being able to do the ADU is that it has to be septic compliance.
Right.
So that if you're adding a fourth bedroom to a 3-bedroom septic, that you're not permitted to do that. If they really wanted to try and improve that, maybe some legislation that would allow some of these new progressive Enviro toilet systems that
Right.
can be pumped once a month, that would allow you to do a dwelling without compliance in that septic system.
Yeah, that's
Then that
interesting.
might really provide housing for people.
Yeah, so she's talking about the whole septic and compliance. I know that if you need to have a bigger system, it doesn't, you're not required to replace it, you're just required to have an approved design. So if something doesn't work, so if my septic needs to be upgraded because of the loading, I don't have to do that now. I have to have a permitted design, so if something goes wrong, I know that capacity can be done. But you're right, that's a consideration, it's a cost consideration. And I get what you're talking about, and I know DES is, Department of Environmental Services is kind of finicky about that. I know they do allow whatever that, kind of innovative septic design things, and I don't know how far that goes, but that's a good question as well. Yes.
I thought I remember in 2017 when they passed this, it did not say it had to be permanent housing. It could be Airbnb or something else.
In the ADU law, it doesn't speak to
And
that.
I was just looking
Yeah.
through, I don't believe we require owner occupancy
In Jackson.
in Jackson.
Okay.
In
And I
Concord.
understand the real question, I said it wrong, but
Yeah.
I didn't see anything about owner occupancy or fault.
Yeah, and so the guidance, at least in the state level, and again, it's only for attached, is just saying the municipality may say it's got to be owner occupied and it has to be primary residence and owner occupied, but that's a choice a municipality can make. So is that your comment, or do you have a question as well?
That, I just
Okay.
wanted to-
All right. Well, I'll be around if there's more questions, and let Mary Ann come up and talk about.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
No, I want to go 2 slides.
All right.
Um,
So while we're still on ADUs, I want to give a shout out to Victoria and the Housing Coalition. She is putting together a town-by-town guide of the zoning, the regulations, the sizes, the parking, the septic, all these things we've just been talking about. I know some of you are not from Jackson, so you may have some questions about, well, yeah, but what about Freedom or Conway or wherever? And Victoria is putting that together, ready for prime time anytime soon? No, not yet.
Almost.
Almost. Okay. She promises me by September. So by September, it will be done, and I'm sure available through the coalition's website. Ann Gibson will have it. So I want to talk about home share and start with first thanking George for going first, because he just gave you a whole lot of reasons around why to do either of these options. But I want to change the focus a little bit to relationships. And that what home share does is create housing that maximizes relationships between people. And we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about zoning and septic and financing and design, because you're using the house you have. It's already there. And it's finding the right people who can live with you and share that space. Now, why do that are all the same reasons that George was talking about. But you start with, you live in a community, and what do you value about that community? Why are your property values high? What do you do here? You ski, you shop, you go to theater, you love your library, you have schools that you support. Well, there are people associated with all of those activities, and those people are the ones who have to live here to be able to provide those things that we love. And so we have to pay a little bit of attention of, well, what are we willing to do to make sure those people are here who make those things available to us. And I could go on. I mean, it's not just like, we always hear about the first responders, and that's important, but what about, our hospital, our lab staff, our nurses, our, the bicycle repair person. So these are people. And I want to just stop for a second and ask, does anybody know a young person with some college debt? Maybe some college debt over $10,000. Same hands. Anybody know somebody in their 60s who's recently divorced or widowed unexpectedly? And the answer is yes. And what happens to them? How many times are they being told, well, you can't afford to continue to live here. You're going to have to go, you're 74 years old and you're going to have to go live with your kids in suburban somewhere, and you want to stay here. So home share is all those same advantages that we were talking about, that you can get income and some property tax relief, but you get also relationships and a living in a community that is safer, because your neighborhoods are safer when there are more people on that road. Just thinking about Jackson Road, that Carter Notch Road is a lot safer if, besides the second homes and the vacation homes, there are some people who are there all the time and who kind of see each other come and go, and you wave and you say, she hasn't been to her mailbox in a while. I wonder what's going on. The more of people who are part of that neighborhood, the safer it is. The bartered services that can take place are very informal relationships, but now you've got people who are living together like an adopted kind of family, only it's easier than family. Because your kids, you got to deal with all their other stuff. But a housemate is a person who's in your space, living there, but you get to say, hey, I'm going up to grocery store, do you need anything? Or I'm out shoveling the walk and suddenly somebody else is out there shoveling the walk with me. You do things together. That it's clearly distributed, affordable housing that you have because you have homes, and that basically we have a lot of empty spaces. Many of us are empty nesters. Some people have just at one point built on the workshop in the of the garage, and you're not doing that workshoppy thing anymore. So there are spaces that people have. It's obviously environmentally sound. I personally love the fact that me, this one little person, can now say I'm sharing all that heating that I'm doing with somebody else, and I don't feel quite so like my carbon footprint is as big because I'm sharing that with somebody else who's in that same space that's already heated. Senior independent living is one of the reasons that our new home share MWB Gibson is under the umbrella of the Gibson Center. Because one of the things that we know is that, just as George said, 86% of people want to live in their community and they want to live in their house and they don't want to go anywhere. And one of the ways to maximize those chances is to have somebody else who's there in the house. Not doing necessarily caregiving. That's a medical licensed thing. But just having somebody else who's got eyes and ears and is coming and going, and like I said, maybe the bargain services. So many, many more of our people will be able to stay at home if we consider home share. So let me switch, to what is it, how's it work, what are we doing? Home share has been around for over 35 years, and there are home share organizations all over the country. I just came back from the National Home Share Organization, who knew, conference, and there were people there from Canada, California, Minnesota, Buffalo, all over the place. So this is not a brand new idea, and we're not doing something radically new. This is well known, the kinks have been worked out. So the idea is that the biggest barriers for people to home share is, one, finding that compatible person, and safety and privacy. So let me address those. What we do through the new Gibson's service, which is a nonprofit, it's we're not trying to create a new online business here. This is nonprofit. We take applications from homeowners and home seekers, are what we call both sides. And there's a $50 application fee, and that covers a full background check, criminal background check, the National Sexual Assault Registry, credit check for the home seeker, mortgage check for the homeowner. That's basically it. But basically, the standard background check information that we can have, and 4 references for each side. So we're providing that screening of compatibility and lay out right ahead of time. If you've got felonies, if you've got, you can't pass the background check, I don't need your $50 application fee because it's not going to work, right? So, and that's laid out well ahead of time, no surprises. Then we complete about an hour and a half interview to really talk about lifestyle. And this is what I mean about relationships. And you have to ask not just those questions like, do you have pets and do you have kids and do you smoke, but do you have hobbies that would be, are you a drummer in the band? It's going to be harder to find a place for you, but okay, tell me more. What temperature do you like your living space to be? What are your sleeping habits? Are you the night owl? Do you work the night shift? Do you have to have quiet during the day? I could go on. Like I say, it's an hour long, but it's an interview to get to know you and your interests, needs, and the real question is the what can't you live with and what can't you live without. Let's start with those basics. Because then, with that bank of home seekers and homeowners, we can then begin to start doing some pairing up. But town, because a lot of places, somebody's working making snow up at Wildcat, they don't want to live in Tamworth, I don't think. That's a stretch. So the town can matter. We then give an option for you to then review who looks like on paper is a good match, but then there's the interview. And that we will sit in on that interview if you want or not. It can be in your home or it can be at the coffee shop. But it's an opportunity to meet. And we encourage people to take it slowly. If you meet and you are not so sure, you take a step back, say, it was great to meet you. We'll think about this, we'll be in touch. You don't have to say, there's no pressure, to take the first person that we introduce you to. But then, if there's a compatibility on both sides, then there's recommended, not required, a trial period where the home seeker moves in for the trial period. And it's recommended by others that it's 2 weeks. I don't want to tell people. Sometimes you know within, the first day if it's working or it's not. You don't need to keep going if it's not working, or you just know it's fine. So the trial period, the home seeker, keeps their home wherever they're living until that trial period is over. They come with a suitcase. They don't move in. They come with their dog. They've got that dog. You got to find out who's the dog or the cat or the compatible as well. So then after the trial period, a fairly lengthy living together agreement is signed, whereby, once again, we're trying to make sure that people have the right expectations going into it. And so you're now agreeing to all those things that you said in the interview with me. It's kind of, yes, we've agreed that we're going to do this, and these are the shared bartered services, or these are the how I feel about guests, and this is what we'll do when your stepkids come to visit, or whatever those factors are. That's not a binding lease. That's a living together agreement. On the legal end, we offer people what is a sample New Hampshire lease that you might choose to sign, but that's not up to me. That's clearly between the homeowner and the home seeker, if they want to sign a lease. I have done home sharing for 30 years. I have a new person who moved in this weekend who will make number 20 of the different people who've lived in the house. I've never had a lease, and it's month to month, and I tell them, I don't want you to be staying here if you don't continuing to be comfortable. So, ours is very informal, but it's based on respect. It's based on privacy. So the privacy part is that you have to have a private bedroom. It's preferable if there's a private bath. Not essential, but preferable. The rest of it can be shared. You might have a private entrance, you might not. But you have to figure out storage, parking, garage or not, those sorts of other physical space issues. Kitchen. How are you going to put the food in the refrigerator? Does somebody get the right side and somebody gets the left side? My other housemate moved out. I still kept all my food over on the left-hand side out of habit, because I knew there'd be somebody coming and they'd take over that side. But somebody else looked at my refrigerator. It's over here. Yes, it's all over here. So those are the things that we try to help people know ahead of time. How are all those different things going to work out? But we don't have a long-range relationship. We like to hear if the agreement is terminated. We'd like to know, so I can learn, was this successful, not successful, maybe a chance to talk with the homeowner and the renter at that point. What worked for you, what didn't work. The vast majority of the time, the renter just moves on. They've got a new job, they've got a new relationship, they finally had enough money to afford a house or something different. So part of it is don't take it personally. People just move on to the next thing. Like I said, I had 18, now 20 different people. So the legality part of it, Deborah has helped find the statutes for home share that make it clearly different from just the tenant-landlord relationship. The homeowner who's sharing space has many more rights than if it's a separate independent unit. So eviction, if that was, or displacing, terminating an agreement can be much faster and much more for less cost because you're in and sharing space. Security I can only tell you, people are safer. And if you look at the surveys, people keep worrying about security. All of the surveys from these other home share agencies that I just met with demonstrate that in the 90 percentile, people feel safer being at home than they did without someone being there, which is a great testimony to what it means humans really prefer to be together than totally alone. Privacy is a matter basically of figuring out your spaces agreements. I've heard everything from, well, if I leave the porch light on, that means I'm available for conversation when he gets home. Or if it's off, it means I don't want to talk tonight. I know it's only 7 o'clock, I didn't go to bed, but just sometimes it's little signals that say, not tonight. Some people share meals, some people don't want to share meals. You kind of work it out, like, again, I want to keep emphasizing, it's relationships. It's how do you relate, how do you get along with these people, and what do you want it to be? But it's people, it's teachers, it's physical therapists, it's that person who lost their husband. It's, just, the stories are heartwarming. So I just want to encourage either side to give me a call. That's it.
I just wanted to say Kate Fournier at Continental Eatery is all excited about this because she knows that many of the workers there would be looking for this kind of opportunity to be involved in shared housing. And so if anyone is thinking about it, consider that she, and I think a lot of the businesses here feel that their workers are, living in Bradfield or up in Milan or something, and would love to be closer to where they actually work. And I know that many of those places where people work would love to write a recommendation or explain something or other. So that kind of connection could be really helpful.
Yeah. What do you do if you have a house that you would consider having somebody come in, but you're stuck with a whole house full of furniture that you can't get rid of? How many of these people want to have a room where they furnish that themselves?
It's actually about 50-50. So you've got a lot of people at both ends of the life cycle. You've got young people who haven't accumulated a ton of stuff. And you've got some of the elders who've already downsized a lot. And they just need a bedroom and don't have kitchen stuff and don't have a lot of stuff. So having furniture isn't a reason not to consider it. It just means we need to find a match of somebody who either they've got some furniture they're willing to put in storage, or we wait to find a person who is looking for a furnished space. Because it's both. Mary?
Is there a way that you have two people who neither one of them has a home, but they want to share an apartment? Is there a way?
That's not the model that we have. I'm not finding people apartments, or you're saying that maybe they found an apartment and they're trying to.
If you could match people who want to share an apartment.
That's a different set of questions and that would be a different kind of search for me. Because I'm looking, when I interview the homeowner, I'm able to go and look at the space they have available and say, and really think it through, how would this space work for them?
There's nothing in the system for doing that.
Right.
Not this week, but maybe next week.
We got to launch with keeping it, yeah. We did launch it 10 days ago, so we've had 7 or 8 calls so far, which is fun.
Is it
No
on
matches
the
yet.
website?
Sorry?
Is it on the Gibson Center's website?
The details not yet. And we're getting a grant out. The grants thing is weird, because yes, there might be funding, and we need the website now, and I've got some folks building it, but I can't pay them until if I get the grant. Yeah, it's fun. So there will be a website hopefully, but before too long, 6 weeks maybe.
Are the applications available?
Yes, and so if anybody wants to call Gibson, and I left something on everybody's seat to let me know, leave it with me. If you want me to be in touch with you, I can get you information, or call Gibson, and Penny can set up. Basically, she just gives me your phone number, and I call you back. Yeah.
Is it ever a
option if someone had that 4-bedroom house and they were only occupying 8 bedrooms, that they could have more than one person sharing?
Yes, it's possible, and then the compatibility of the others, should be part of the interviewing process, because you're now all sharing the kitchen. So to be respectful, you want to think about how you blend this group together, but absolutely. And then, if you've already got that kind of house, as I was saying, you don't have to worry about septic and all the other things. It's already zoned for that, the idea that that house would be full. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
The living agreement that is between the homeowner and the
Home seeker, the
home
renter.
seeker.
Mm-hmm.
Do you help them with that?
Yes. I sit and go through that with them, like, okay, so you both agree to this, and you both understand that, and make sure that it's part of it. It's a discussion as much as a just fill in the blank, because the whole idea is to really clearly keep talking about those value words of respect and listening and communicating and asking people, oh, so, if you did have a disagreement about that, how would you let each other know? Sort of helping them set up for success.
Right.
And this is the difference between what we're trying to do and the online things. The online, they kind of just match them up, and sometimes they work. But we're trying to really provide that much more of a personalized chance to make it be successful. And largely because I want to pull the homes and the people who wouldn't use Craigslist. If some of you get in touch with, what's her name at Thompson House?
Kate.
Kate, right. I don't care if you all go out and find matches, that you talk to her and she finds somebody for you. You might let me know that because of what you heard tonight, you went off and did it on your own. That would be sort of helpful. I don't have to be in the middle, but what I'm trying to do is make it possible for the people who have hesitance or are reluctant to see how possible this can be. That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you.
Other questions?
That's really helpful.
I'm Scott Badger. I'm with Jackson Housing and Opportunity Matters. Just real quickly before you leave, first, thank you very much, George, Victoria, and Marianne, for great presentations. Jackson Housing Opportunity Matters from now on, J Home. Really, our purpose is to promote housing in Jackson, but beyond that, to promote the community in Jackson. What kind of community we want to live in? Do we want to live in a community that has young adults, young families, children, and seniors? And I think what we know more than anything is that there is no silver bullet that's going to solve that or those housing challenges. And so seizing any opportunity is really the way forward. And so, home sharing, ADUs, et cetera, is really, using every opportunity that comes our way. I think is the way that we're going to achieve more housing and therefore achieve a more vibrant community. And so thank you very much for coming tonight.